So, Heather, been a sort of a to a certain extent, we have these two major stories that are, um, in many ways, running in parallel with each other, and that is the COVID relief bill and impeachment. And both these stories reveal something about the Republicans. The stories in some respects are at odds with each other in terms of what it's revealing about the Democrats. There's a fascinating dynamic that's starting to emerge um, within both parties. In that there was a nascent split in the Republican Party, which seems to be just all but mended up,
Hmm.
and we should talk about that. And then there seems to be a burgeoning split in the Democratic Party, and the lines are not as I would have necessarily predicted them. But why don't we start with the Republican Party? Because something interesting happened, as far as I can tell, this week, maybe over the past week, week and a half, which was um, we are now 20 some odd days out, 22 days out from the insurrection at the Capitol. And immediately following that, the Republicans, I'm talking about the Republican leadership, seemed at least somewhat united in their feeling that Donald Trump was to blame. Mitch McConnell had announced to, or I should say, privately leaked to the New York Times that he was very happy that Donald Trump was going to be impeached. Um, you had McCarthy, the Senate leader, the House leader, say that he felt Donald Trump inspired this insurrection. And now here we are a couple of weeks later. And to the extent that there was any attempt by the Republicans to sever their ties with Donald Trump, that seems to be over.
Um, yeah, that it does seem to be over, but their problems aren't over. And they have an issue going on in the Republican Party that is going to be dogging them for some time. I think they've obviously decided, looking at the reaction among the grassroots. I mean, we saw Mitch McConnell was challenged in Kentucky. He actually beat that challenge. They had some of the rabble rousers in the Republican Party down there want to censure him, and they beat that back, saying they didn't have standing. Arizona, they censured Cindy McCain, and they censured uh, Jeff Flake and the governor Steve Ducey for failing to be properly, loyal to Donald Trump. Up in Oregon, they've got some QAnon stuff going on. So, and of course, they've got this, Liz Cheney, who sort of took the lead in the House of being the one to vote for impeachment and basically come down hard. We talked about this before. She made a bet that by the time 2024 rolls around, that anybody who opposed Trump is going to look good. She and Ben Sass seem to have, decided that was their future as Republican presidential aspirants. But she's getting a tremendous amount of blowback up there in Wyoming, and they are censuring her, and they're trying to remove in the House. They're trying to remove her from her leadership position, et cetera, et cetera. So there's been a lot of blowback over any attempt to separate from Donald Trump. And Mitch McConnell felt that. And I think that led him and many of the rest of the Republicans to do what they always do when this happens, just like after Access Hollywood or after
Yeah.
the first impeachment or anything else. This is their pattern. They always fall back into line. But there is a problem. There's new polling, and this is being borne out across the board, that, well, for instance, there's one here. Let's see. It was the Politico Morning Consult poll, which just came out this week. Over half of Republican voters, 56%, believe that Trump should either probably or definitely run for president again in 2024. 56%. That's a lot, but over a third, 36%, think he probably or definitely should not. Then there's this idea of having a third party. Their Republican and Republican leaning independent voters are closely split. between the Republican Party and the notional Patriot Party that Trump recently floated. A third said they're more interested in being a member of the Republicans, and 30% that said they'd be more interested in being a member of the third
Wow.
of the Patriot Party. So, I mean, now in individual districts, this may not be a big problem. It'll be mostly, like in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, she won by 50 points, right? So those are the kind of places where, you can't be too Trumpy. In fact, she's going even beyond Trump, I think. You've got those QAnon congressional people. But this is a problem for Republicans on a national basis, and certainly in states where it's there's a close it's polarized closely. I mean, look what happened in Arizona, look what happened in Georgia. Colorado used to be purple, and be a swing state, and so they have got problems. And it's true, I see what they're doing here. They get this blowback, and these people are violent and they're horrible and they're threatening their families and they're doing all kinds of things, which, you can see just on a sort of human level. They kind of go, okay, well, whatever. Be nice if they cared about democracy and, the country and the Constitution, but this is where they're at. But they have got a problem. I mean, if they're losing 36%, saying that they don't want Donald Trump to run again, and they are out there basically, as far as I can tell. I mean, Kevin McCarthy was down there this week in Florida, basically there to make up and
Yep.
kiss the ring. So I think they still have a problem. I think Mitch McConnell knows it, and basically is hoping maybe that they can demonize the Democrats enough to make that 36% come back and vote for Donald Trump, even if they don't want to, assuming he runs again and wins re-election. But they're still Trumpifying the whole party, whether Trump's doing it himself or not.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I wonder, Senator Rob Portman, I think it was this week, announced his more or less resignation. He's not going to run again. And I can't help but think that is a function of that. And now, like you mentioned, these 10 or 11 Republicans in the House who voted for impeachment, those are going to be pickup opportunities for the Democrats, because those either they get primaried from the right and a absolute lunatic enters into those seats. And in some of those seats, they're not, they could turn those districts into swing districts, frankly. Right. And like you say, and this is, what's fascinating about this to me is that I am not so surprised that the Republican Party is Trump's party, right? In terms of like the voting base, that doesn't surprise me. What was interesting, and I think what we had anticipated, was that the Republicans were going to try and sever themselves from Donald Trump. And I was afraid that they would be able to do this. Not that their policies would be any different or anything like that, but just in the sort of public's eye, because certainly the media was willing to sort of help that project in many respects, right? And in part, the media was willing to do that because Joe Biden was willing to do that, right? I mean, and Nancy Pelosi was willing to do this. They were all in the run up to the election, like, we need a Republican Party, and they weren't saying it in a sort of a theoretical sense. Joe Biden was on the record throughout the campaign, the fever will break. I don't think he used those exact words. I think that was more of the Obama words, but he was saying, wait till Donald Trump is gone. 6 months later, they're going to be fine. I mean, this is where these two stories sort of intersect, right? Because the real question ultimately is going to be, and this is coming on the heels of a vote, I guess that happened on Monday, where the entire Republican caucus, short of 5 people, tried to get the impeachment hearings tossed, ostensibly because of unity. And the message that they're sending on impeachment, the real question is how much will Joe Biden and the Democrats, broadly speaking, pick that up when it comes to COVID relief. The idea that, like, hey, there's a negotiation to be had here and we can find something reasonable, because we're already starting to see that happen in the COVID thing. Now, there's some factors that could mitigate that and could explain that away as being less than sincere, because, or at the very least, sort of a mulligan, because they have until early March. That's almost the time that they'll need to get a reconciliation bill sort of up on its feet and have the procedural systems set up, and the bill itself sort of like okayed and made sure that it's viable against like the Byrd rule, which has to do with the deficit, and has to do with proving that it's a government that the everything in the bill will impact the budget, et cetera, et cetera. So the point being, on impeachment, the Republicans are telling a story, which is they are Donald Trump's party. They cannot. They have no wiggle room. And the question is are the Democrats hearing that story when it comes to COVID relief? It seems to me.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there's still, I mean, you can still see the sort of vestiges of, some kind of delusion that this was all just kind of this was a bad dream. It was like that, that Dallas show where they woke up and the whole storyline was just somebody's dream. I mean, there's still that kind of attitude you can see in some places within the Democratic leadership, and even with Biden in some respects. I mean, he said the other day that, well, I thought that the $2,000, I just assumed that because that had a strong bipartisan majority before in the House, that would be easy to pass. I just assumed we'd be able to do that. And I'm thinking, okay, you can say that, but I mean, of course, Donald Trump was president then. You do understand how this works, right? When it's his idea, that's different than it is, when it's yours. I mean, you have to understand that. And I don't know if he, I mean, I have to assume he does get that, I mean, whatever. But that's the sort of thing you sort of see swirling around in the Democratic discussions here. Now, again, it's just as you said, we don't know how much of this is positioning and, negotiating stances and what have you. But the truth is, what you just said, the most important thing about this is they have no time for this. They don't have any time to deal with the Nelson Cornhusker kickback or some other nonsense, even in the Democratic Party. They're going to get that too. If they decide to go with reconciliation, we'll be back in that same situation where you're negotiating with the Democrats. Hopefully it won't be, the way it was on Obamacare. This is a much less complicated, issue. They're not building something from the ground up. This is just, putting in place a bunch of policies to, get checks to people and vaccinations to people. But the urgency, I mean, right. My God, I can't even believe they're talking about March. Why? I mean, to me, this is one where you give it a week, and go, guys, we have an emergency here. This is not something that this is not some program we're trying to put into place. This is emergency relief. So I'm a little confused by that and starting to get a little bit concerned, because when I keep hearing things like March, and well, that's when the eviction moratorium expires. I'm going, it doesn't have to expire, actually. That's not really, you're making up deadlines here. And if you're going to do that, make the deadline February 15th. That's 2 weeks. And then you do it. I don't know why March.
I think usually they don't do usually they don't do anything until there is a drop dead deadline like that, right? Where they just barely, miss by 2 days when something runs out. The other aspect of that is that the reconciliation process, it seems to me, if my understanding is that you need to set up a couple of votes to set up the reconciliation. It's in and of itself. And I wonder if There isn't a sense that, well, we need to project this notion that we're actually trying to put something together beforehand. I mean, I am, even if they are play acting with this whole unity thing, um, it scares me that they feel there's an audience for this play. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not clear. Like even if this is pretense, which would make me happy, it scares me that they think they need to have pretense. Like, there's no audience for this that is meaningful in any way, as far as I can tell, particularly not 2 years out. And what was fascinating is that today, Thursday, there was a Senate caucus phone call, and apparently John Ossoff was very forceful on the phone call. We need to go big, and we need those $2,000 checks, and nibbling at the edges of, like, maybe we shouldn't make it available to people who are making $85,000 as opposed to 75 or 95, or maybe we should make it 1,400 instead of 60, instead of 2,000. All of these things, the and I think there's like some very narrow, weedy argument that, like, well, you'd want something that's a little bit more targeted and this and that. But the bottom line is, we're really talking about, we should be shoveling money and resources out the door in any way, almost like the vaccine, frankly. Use all the doses. Worry about it later. Use all the doses that you have and put it out the door. The other thing is from a political standpoint, you're just not going to pay a price for aiming too high versus aiming too low. I just think that is, the big takeaway from the Obama years is you don't hear many people. And, we had this big GameStop Reddit thing this week, which was, at least by some accounts, at least partially driven by resentment and anger, where you had, these millennials who witnessed their parents lose their homes, or foreclosures, or stock market getting away with rigging stuff. Um, and a lot of that came from the way that the Obama administration handled the financial crisis, right? Which was, better to aim too low on what we need than too high, because we don't want people coming back at us and saying you were wasteful. Let's just try and totally finesse this. And I actually think that's a charitable view on it. But
Yeah.
but that was the sort of the broad, consensus. And it remains to be seen if that's what's going on here with the Biden administration and with some of the senators. Um, but just the idea that they feel like they, even in the best case scenario, that they feel like they need to play act, is still sort of disturbing, because I just don't think there's a constituency for this anymore. I think the media is okay with the Democrats going all in on this. Occasionally you'll get your New York Times writing an editorial, don't do so many executive orders. But I am willing to bet that, this time next week, no one even remembers that the New York Times wrote it, never mind changed their mind about it. You know what I mean? This is a different environment. And um, Democrats better pick up on that quick, one way or another, it seems.
Well, I agree with you, and I hope that what we're seeing here is just some vamping, getting things going. It has only been a little over a week since
Right, right,
Biden
right.
in. They're still staffing up. They're trying to get things going. So, this may just be a case of them just kind of vamping and hoping that they can get get everything in order so that they can make their move. I do get the sense that they understand the urgency, particularly of COVID and the resultant economic crisis. I mean, we still had, what was it this week? I think it was 800 plus thousand new unemployment claims. I mean, that's astonishing. It's beyond
800,
belief that
800,000.
yeah, 800. Yeah, I mean, and last week it was 900. I mean, this is insane what's happening here, and they have to understand that. And I'm going to hope that's what's going on. But nonetheless, there this idea. I think you're onto something here, and sort of questioning the idea that this unity thing that it's really useful, or it may even be a problem, because you
Right.
see the Republicans already doing this. Oh, you wanted unity, and now, you're not passing our agenda. How dare you? I mean, this is, and of course we knew they were going to do that, because they always do. They're trolls, and that's a troll. That's saying you wanted unity, and now you're doing the things that you ran on. How dare you? And we're all supposed to sit there and make excuses and dance on the head of a pin, trying to defend the fact that they're trying to do the things they ran on, and Republicans are laughing in their faces. Essentially, this is their game. They do it all the time, and the idea that they would give them any room beyond just going on Fox News and making snarky comments is probably a bad idea, because it ends up making unity a thing. And of
Right.
course, Biden ran on it. He did the inauguration was all about that, but they can frame unity. They can frame it their own way, which is, we're going to unify behind the American people. 67% of Americans want this. 77% of Americans want this. That's what unity is. Unity is giving the vast majority of Americans what they voted for, what they wanted, and they don't just forget the Republicans. It's not about unity with Republicans. It's not about unity with the MAGA crowd. I mean, that's impossible. So why even put it in those terms? But we'll see. I mean, maybe this whole thing will drop out. I don't think the Republicans are going to be doing anything very they're not going to reach their hands across the aisle. So
Right.
unity's going to be a thing, not going to be literally relevant in any way.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that what should be a means to providing material benefits for the public was touted so much that it became an end. And if it becomes the ends, which is unity, well, then the Republicans have a good argument. It's like, you've
Yeah.
got to do, you said the number one, if the number one goal, primary goal is unity, as opposed to, say, like, feed Americans, or make sure that Americans are not, immiserated by job losses, or make sure that, small businesses stay open, or that teachers are safe and that kids are safe. I mean, the unity is supposed to be a mechanism in which to achieve those things, as opposed to an end in of itself. Because if it's an end in of itself, then there's no point in even, why even have an agenda beyond that? You just capitulate so that you get unity, and that's the danger of putting it out there and having yourself judged on unity. Now, I get the sense that that's not sticking. I think they're just like the need by of the American people, and I think other, those who are not in need, can see it is real. And so I think that is the most compelling thing for Joe Biden to pursue. And and we'll see. I mean, we have this we have a organizing resolution that went forward at the beginning of this week, because Mitch McConnell dropped his demand that Chuck Schumer's organizing resolution include, a provision to avoid the filibuster. And so we go forward. Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema basically say they're not going to, in any way, vote to get rid of the filibuster. And where does that leave us? The main question is, will they vote to maybe reform the filibuster if Democrats are attempting to get some legislation in place? What's your sense on that?
Well, I'm hopeful that that's what it is. That basically Mitch realized that I mean, they couldn't go on much longer like this, right? I mean, that was this idea that there was some, they could just refuse to organize the Senate, was an untenable position. And, they were in a, sort of a game of chicken, I guess, to see who was going to fold first. And my sneaking suspicion, and I have nothing to base this on, but I have to assume that this came about, Schumer just said, hey, look, Kirsten, Joe, why don't you just, just come out and say that you won't agree, and to get rid of the filibuster using those words, which I think were the exact words,
Yep.
and we'll deal with this down the road as we see how this unfolds and see, how much they do end up obstructing. And of course they will. I mean, I can't imagine that even Chuck Schumer has any sort of delusion that they're going to cooperate. But it makes sense to me that they would have done that. And if Cinema is not up for reelection until 2024, and I think Manchin also
Same.
2024, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yep.
So they've got plenty of time to work this through. And, so I'm hopeful that that's what it was. Now, judging by the past, it's entirely possible that we're wrong about that. And that basically both of those people are going to stand in the way of progressive legislation. They're going to get a lot of blowback. Both of them are. It's not going to be helpful. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are worried about Manchin switching parties, which would, of course, be devastating if he were to do that. I don't think Cinema is in the same position. The Republicans in Arizona are so crazy. I don't think they'd want her. They'd probably say no. We'd go do something else. But there is some worry about that. But from what I understand, I don't think Manchin sees himself in any way as a Republican. And hopefully, what they've done is worked out some ideas about how they can do some reforms around the filibuster that will allow them to get around it. And as you and I discussed, I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before, there's good reasons for McConnell to want to get around the filibuster at this point, because if he does that and allows the Democrats to take those hard votes, lets Joe Manchin be the guy, or Sinema and Manchin together, that lets a lot of his senators off the hook,
Yeah.
and they don't have to be the ones to have to face their voters in 2 years, which is what his big concern is. So, there are reasons why I could see, some dancing around this thing, that McConnell sees it as his benefit to keep the filibuster live, to keep that live, and also to be able to appease his, Trumpish base by saying that they've agreed not to do it. So anyway, well, we'll see. It's all very opaque, really, what's happening there.
I had an interesting conversation with Eric Levitz about the filibuster on the Majority Report, and he speculated that what we could see is, I mean, there's two different ways, right, in which you can reform the filibuster as opposed to getting rid of it. One is you can make the process of filibustering a little bit more onerous, and also sort of degrade how durable the filibuster is. In other words, you need to be there on 24 hours. You need to be you need to control the Senate floor throughout the thing. You can't just call up the Senate cloakroom and say, we're going to filibuster. And then everybody says, okay. No, you actually need to, physically be there, which could make it more difficult and require more of an actual investment by senators. Or you could say like, okay, you can filibuster at 60 votes, but that's only going to slow it down 4 days. And then after that, it drops to 55. And then after that, it drops to 52, that type of thing. Or the other sort of broad umbrella of filibuster reform could be akin to reconciliation, in that reconciliation is a 50 vote threshold that was instituted to deal with budgetary matters. Well, you could also say we're going to have special types of bills that are going to be favored or advantaged in some fashion, that have to do only with voting, let's say. So when it comes to voting rights, 51 votes will carry the day. When it comes to something else that doesn't involve government finances, we will allow for a reconciliation style type of vote in those instances. And Levitz's theory is that it's possible that a Manchin and a Sinema would be more amenable to the latter, because there may be certain issues they don't want to take votes on. Joe Manchin may not want to take votes on an immigration reform bill because it's from West Virginia. People there, not so forward thinking when it comes to immigrants. Kristen Sinema might want to avoid taking a vote on gun control because it's Arizona and people maybe a little bit less interested in gun control. So it's conceivable we could see something like that going to the
That's
Senate, where
interesting.
a certain category and type of bill is is advantaged under Senate rules. I mean, it all remains to be seen. I feel like we have like maybe 4 or 5 weeks where we're going to really know the answer. Joe Biden's administration so far has been, unleashing a lot of executive orders, which are probably not as good as they appear at first blush, but they are better than, not issuing them. And they have been able to return a lot of policies that Trump sort of bastardize, if you will, to their sort of like state that they were in when Obama left office. And that's a good thing. But we've yet to really, really see how the Democrats are going to approach all of this, all of
Yeah.
the, I mean, you hear Joe Biden talking today and yesterday about the idea of, nibbling away at the edges of the $1,400. And, look, we have a mechanism to means test this stuff. It's called taxes.
Of course.
We can, we can just raise taxes. You can raise taxes in reconciliation, seems to me. Of course you can. And so if you're really worried about means testing something, which I think in the context of a pandemic seems a little bit foolish to me, but if that's really your jam, raise taxes on wealthy people, and then boom, you're not letting any of these people get away with it. You know what I mean? And um, that I don't know. I guess it just all remains to be seen. When we reconvene by March 15th, we are going to know a lot about what's going to happen. It seems to me in the 22 election.
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, everything that's happening right now, and that's one reason why this is difficult. It's difficult to follow. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. We don't really know the real motives of a lot of the things other than the Republicans. I think we know their motives,
Right.
but as far as Democrats, it's still kind of hard to tell. And whether or not there's a real game plan here, I'm not sure yet whether that there is one. It seems like there's still a lot of sort of trying to figure out as they go along, and
Mm.
maybe that's fine. I mean, they might be good at that, and there you do need to be flexible and be able to kind of change with whatever the circumstances are. But the urgency of the issues that we have on the table right now, I mean, this is unprecedented. This is like, and I think they have to view it the way that they would view it if there'd been like a 9/11 kind of thing, right? I
Yep.
mean, there was no pussyfooting around about that. It was just, we're going to get in there, we're going to get this done. And they did the authorization to use military force with one dissent, with Barbara Lee, the lone dissenter in California. This is I mean, to me, you've got 400,000 people dead, 430 as of today. We're looking at over 500,000 people dead, and untold carnage from the disease itself, and to the carnage to the healthcare system, and then all the economic suffering that's gone with it. And it's weird. The economic suffering has been so unequal. I mean,
So
there are tons
unequal.
of people who are doing great. I mean, they're doing better than ever.
Yep.
The housing market suddenly is, booming all of a sudden. And
Yep.
yet you've got people waiting in line for hours
For
for
food.
food, for boxes full of food to feed their families. I mean, this is just really, really, this is just an unprecedented crisis, and one that they cannot play normal political games with. And I just, that's why the unity thing to me is frustrating, because that sort of speaks to some sort of ongoing sense that we all need to love one another, and George Bush saying, I think everybody ought to love their neighbor like they'd like to be loved themselves. He said it, and I'm kind of like, that's nice, but you know what, look at, go take care of your people, George. Okay, could you just
Exactly.
go have a chat with them, because I don't really want to hear that. But this is, and I get it, we all need to, it'd be much better if the country could come to consensus, and we could all not, this great hostility would not be there. But right now we've got 430,000 dead people, we've got bodies, and that is a long-term cultural crisis that, we can try and deal with. But right now, this thing has to get done. So that's a little. I'm starting to get a little frustrated, I guess, and I probably shouldn't belabor that, but it is sort of bothering me a bit that we just don't have time
I
to
agree. I agree,
keep.
and I think the healthiest thing I can say about, or the most optimistic thing I can say about this administration so far, and it is not to take away. There's been, like I say, a bunch of executive orders that, um, some are more substantive than others, but in terms of where they're pointing, are very good. And some of the federal, the cabinet picks and some of the other picks that Joe Biden has done have been good. He is definitely seems to be aware and cautious of making appointments or decisions that are going to, essentially trigger the left in many respects. And I say that in the best way. And so there are some positives here, but the biggest positive is just that I feel like the the left of the Democratic Party, and maybe, the center left of the Democratic Party even, they're on top of this in a way that, no one was in Barack Obama's election. And I
Agree.
think that's, and as we've been saying from the very beginning about Joe Biden, of all the presidents that you could get who might be responsive to that type of pressure and skepticism, Joe Biden, he's my second favorite type of president. I keep saying this. He's a cipher. And so, if you can't get the person you like in terms of ideology, get somebody who is conceivably could be pushed, not to share your ideology, but could be pushed by that ideology. And I think that's happening with Joe Biden. I just a matter of time. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in the Senate. We're going to have to wait and see what Joe Biden pushes for. And until that time, we will talk again next week. We will be very close. I guess we're still about a week and a half away from the launch of the impeachment hearings, but I have a feeling those could be more consequential than the last time around. And
I hope so.
me too. All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Sam. Thanks for having me.